Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. I'm Dan Scogan, your host for the Ag Innovation News Podcast. Guests on this podcast shed light on innovations in value-added agriculture, highlight important voices and work that's being done throughout the Minnesota ag sector, and educate the public about resources and organizations that support Minnesota agriculture. And today we're going to cover all of those bases. Today, we also welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, Jason Robinson. Jason is the Business Development Director for Food for AURI. Jason, welcome to the podcast, and let's just get started with some background on you, your bio, your educational experience, your work experience, and your background. Just tell us a little bit about Jason Robinson.
Happy to do so, Dan. Thanks for the welcome, and I'm excited to be back on the podcast. A little bit about me. I am a chemical engineering graduate from the University of Wisconsin, so don't hold that against me. I spent 19 years at General Mills in corporate R&D after I graduated from college. I'm working on product, process, and packaging development, where I launched new products. I was responsible for troubleshooting manufacturing challenges and also for finding opportunities for cost savings. On a personal note, I met my wife at General Mills in 2000 as well. While I was there, my eyes were opened up to the world of the entrepreneur during an assignment where my team and I ran a small startup under the big corporate umbrella. We were exploring new product categories General Mills historically hadn't been in, and I learned a lot about myself and, more importantly, my interest in the entrepreneurial world of food. So in 2017, General Mills restructured its organization, and then my position was eliminated. After some soul searching that helped me to rediscover my passion for the food industry, I discovered AURI and its mission and found the perfect fit and was really able to explore this opportunity in supporting the entrepreneurial world of food businesses. And what I learned in those first few months at AURI is that I was very happy to be supporting food businesses and not running a food business, because I realized that that just wasn't something I was interested in, but I love to help.
So how would you define your role at AURI?
Here at AURI, and I've been here for 6.5 years now. Specifically, I am in business development with a focus on supporting the food ecosystem in Minnesota and beyond. What that means in some respects, it's an element of nonprofit sales is kind of the way that I've described it. And it's easy to be a salesperson and talk about the value of the organization and what it brings to the public when you truly believe in its mission. But in terms of the actual entrepreneur support that I provide in this business development role, my colleague, Lali Okino, a very experienced and incredible food scientist, and I lead our food team to help agricultural producers, entrepreneurs, and others transform the Midwest's rich agricultural resources into sustainable food businesses by providing affordable access to food science and business expertise and infrastructure. It's a little bit of a canned description of what I do, but at the end of the day, that is a concise description of the type of work that we do. In other words, we're kind of serving that mission by helping food businesses develop their products, troubleshoot their food science, safety, and processing challenges, and get them into the marketplace successfully and for the long term.
I think of those food entrepreneurs who are new to it, to producing a new product or process, and they've got a million questions and they don't even know what some of the questions are as they work into it. And it sounds like your role is to be there to help them get on the right rabbit hole, I guess, before they go down the wrong one.
You're right, Dan. One thing that I learned throughout my degree program is how to problem solve. I don't do much work as an engineer anymore, but when I did, it was very interesting to sort of recognize that the greatest value I took away from my degree program was how to solve a problem. And the most impactful component of solving a problem is defining the right problem to solve in the first place. And so oftentimes what I see is that the value that I can bring to our entrepreneurial community is identifying the problems that need to be solved and asking the question appropriately so that we can solve the right problem.
And then to set the stage and the context for today's conversation, A lot of these entrepreneurs come to you or to Lolly or to AURI with same or similar questions, I would guess. You're answering the same question a lot of times for different people. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate, and we do. We answer a lot of the same questions. Now, this is not to say that we don't love interacting with each and every client we can. We love to do that. It's the reason why we do the work that we do. It's amazing to me that entrepreneurs are willing to jump in, eyes wide open, with both feet to explore the opportunity to start a business and potentially result in some generational wealth for their family or to have a side business that they just love to do. The problem is, while we love to talk to all of them, we can't catch them all. So, we as an organization and as a food team have been on a mission to figure out how we might be able to better serve our mission by helping more of those entrepreneurs. And just to put it in context, the Minnesota Department of Ag, or the MDA, has told us that they expect for the first time to surpass 10,000 registered cottage food producers in 2024. And so these producers are the smallest food businesses that operate under an exemption from licensing. And you typically find these folks selling a barbecue sauce or pickles or a salsa at a farmer's market, maybe even bread. This doesn't include any businesses you'd find selling their products in a supermarket. So when you think about this number of 10,000 cottage food registrations in 2024, and that doesn't include anyone selling at a grocery store, compare that to what a big year for us looks like, where we might talk to 150 different food businesses. And so, like you said, many of them have similar questions. So we've been thinking for a while, how do we better serve more clients if they're asking similar questions?
And how can they help themselves? And so I'm just so excited about this program that we're talking about today. What AURI has decided to do, with a little help from AI, artificial intelligence, and USDA, you have now developed a virtual assistant that I'm going to call AVA, who's ready to help. So tell me about the project. Tell me about the concept of AVA.
Absolutely. I'm excited because this is a tool that everyone's heard about from the context of artificial intelligence and how it can transform work that everyone does. And so we wanted to bring some of that to AURI and the work that we do. But I'm going to take a quick step back and kind of showcase the path that we've been on. Since I arrived at AURI, we started talking about how can we serve our mission most effectively. And so we started doing that by really making sure that we appropriately scoped projects for our clients. And that evolved into providing and building out digital content on our website so that more clients could have access to more information than they might necessarily be able to glean from a single conversation, or that they weren't restricted to having a conversation with myself or Lolly or my other scientist colleagues, Ben Swanson or Clay Newton. And so we've been on this journey to really explore how can we continue to most efficiently deliver our knowledge and guidance to the entrepreneurs. And so what we came up with was this idea of harnessing the power of artificial intelligence once we really started to learn about it through tools like ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. And how can we harness the power of this idea to support the people we consider to be our clients? And so that brings us to today. And we can talk a little bit about AVA, which is short for AURI's virtual assistant. It's a free web-based tool that anyone can access for free at auri.org/AVA. So pretty easy to remember.
And we're going to talk more about what that looks like a little bit later on in the program. It came through funding from USDA, Jason. Is that correct? Tell me a little bit more about that.
USDA did provide the funding for this assistant. We were, as an organization, awarded funding from USDA Rural Development Cooperative Services to create an agriculture innovation center. Now, the purpose of this center and the funding was to provide technical and business development assistance to value-added ag producers to help them develop and market value-added ag products. In my case, that translates to food products. So we used this funding in a sense that was somewhat flexible to develop this idea and bring it to life. And USDA, when we talked to them about it, was excited for us to bring this to life to showcase as a tool that could help a number of individuals beyond sort of the traditional one-to-one client support.
So, how difficult was it to custom build AVA for its role at AURI?
Well, if I'm being honest with you, the actual amount of work that we did at AURI wasn't that challenging once we found the right development partner. So that's the caveat is you need to find the right partner to solve the right challenge. Kind of going back to what I said earlier about defining the right problem to solve. We partnered with a company based in Minneapolis called Cantata Solutions. And what they did was customize and tune a search algorithm based on the Chat GPT large language model, as well as develop a user friendly interface that was easy to understand and easy to work with. So then, once that backbone was built, we needed to populate the content library. And that's where the vast majority of work from AURI comes in, because AVA builds responses to questions based on what is in its content library. So we essentially developed or curated all the information that AVA uses in its content library to build its responses. So a lot of collation, a lot of curation, a lot of development of that content, which is really where our expertise came in.
I want to get a little deeper dive into some of that and talk about how you protect the clients that are using AVA. But I want to remind our listeners that you're listening to the Ag Innovation News podcast from AURI. And our guest today is Jason Robinson. He is the Business Development Director for Food at AURI. And we're talking about Ava, who is going to work as AURI's helper in helping food entrepreneurs get their questions answered as they go through the process. Jason, you mentioned just before the break there that content library is how AVA determines how to answer questions that might come in. But you told me before we started our podcast today that Ava is not learning while she works, and everything is put in as content for Ava. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So, unlike other artificial intelligence tools, again, like ChatGPT, like Microsoft Copilot, Ava does not learn from previous questions asked. And the reason Ava does not learn is because AURI made a specific effort to help protect user identity and user information during the interaction with Ava. So, what that means is that Ava only gets smarter when users take the time to provide feedback on its performance. We've built in a functionality into the tool to provide thumbs up and thumbs down feedback for each response. So when users take the time to provide feedback on its performance, we learn what works well and what doesn't work well, and frankly, what's missing from the content library. So, in other words, after you use it, please let AURI know where Ava may be lacking in information so that we can either create or find that content to make Ava even smarter for the future and future questions that are asked.
And even though Ava isn't learning while it's working, you are concerned that there is still good information being put in the content library, and not everybody's opinion or observation can be added to Ava's library.
You're right, Dan. I think it's really important to note that the magic of AVA, well, there's really two components to the magic of AVA. One is it allows users to ask questions in their own words. So you don't have to be a food scientist or an industry veteran to really ask the question that you want to get the answer to in specific terminology. So that's the first piece of magic. I wanted to make sure I put that in there. The second piece of the magic is that whatever goes into AVA has AURI's hands on it, if you will. So AVA's content library includes text documents, it includes websites, it includes audio content, it includes video content. All of that material has been curated or designed or developed by AURI in some form or fashion. Because the last thing we want is anyone with an internet connection to be able to input content into AVA such that it gets spit back out in AVA's responses as credible knowledge that you can count on to be scientifically accurate and precise. So we wanted to make sure that you could trust the answers AVA provides because all the content AVA relies upon to answer those questions has been curated by AURI's subject matter experts.
And you wanted to be careful that AVA was not harvesting information about how to produce a product or a process and sharing that with another client that might be checking in to get a question answered.
That's correct, Dan. It is something that we were very conscious of. Remember, I said earlier that AVA does not learn from previous questions asked. The reason, again, is to make sure that you can trust that the data you input into AVA, meaning the questions that you ask, are questions that you can trust remain essentially confidential between you and AVA in that session. So none of that information gets stored. It is really an issue where you are able to ensure that your confidential information won't get back out to the public.
So we're stepping into the elevator, and you've maybe done this in longer answers. What's your elevator speech about AVA? Describe AVA to me.
AVA's mission is all about providing 24/7 access to answers on commonly asked food science, safety, and business questions for agricultural producers or entrepreneurs interested in starting or running a food business. In our words, it's the next best thing to a phone call or email exchange with me or with my colleagues Lolly, Ben, or Clay, because it's on your time and not on our availability. And it's targeted to support anyone who is an agricultural producer or an entrepreneur that is interested in starting a food business or is food business curious. And at the same time, it can also be helpful to the support industry in the sense of finding answers to the questions that their clients might have so that they can provide even better support to the clients when they might be helping them develop a business plan, for instance.
When you think about AVA going to work for the food producer, the farmer, how does AVA help them?
It comes back to this context of having a producer be interested in driving new streams of revenue. So, just like with any business, a farm business can't rely on just one source of revenue for sustainability of their business model. So, if a farmer is interested in expanding their sources of revenue, one way to do so is by adding value to the agricultural products that they produce, whether it's the crops that they harvest, the animals that they raise, or the animals that they milk. So, AVA is a tool to help those ag producers, those farmers, those ranchers, those dairy farmers get smarter about how to start up and run a food business and do it in the most accurate way. And let's be honest, a big part of the challenge with starting up a new revenue stream in this manner, a new part of the business, is that you have to take care of your primary business first. In the case of the farmer, that means you have to make sure that the cows are fed and milked every day, as an example. So, oftentimes, the amount of time that they have available to dedicate to a new business venture is not 9 to 5. It's going to have to be at night after they have completed their responsibilities for the day. And the unfortunate part is that service providers may not be available to answer those questions when the farmer is available. So AVA represents that opportunity to get a little bit smarter about the questions that you might have when you don't have to rely on creating a connection to somebody who's only working their 9 to 5 job.
And then, Jason, what does AVA's work mean for the food entrepreneur?
It's similar to the farmer because food entrepreneurs typically also have another business that they're working on, whether it's the IT director at a big company, or whether it's running a restaurant, or maybe you're a stay at home mom and you've got a little time after putting the kids to bed at night. The reality is, again, the fact that you don't have to take your precious time out of your workday during the time when AURI subject matter experts might be available or other experts might be available in order to get some of those questions answered. So it's a similar mission and a similar type of support that AVA can provide, whether you're a farmer or whether you're a food entrepreneur. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that one of the biggest benefits is in helping the farmer or the entrepreneur better understand the food safety precautions that they may need to take in order to make sure that they deliver a safe product to the marketplace. Because at the end of the day, a safe food product is of utmost importance to delivering a trusted food product into the market. And if you can't trust the information you're getting, then you may not be doing the right thing. And it could ultimately end up in a product recall or a public health incident that you don't want to be a part of.
And I guess to go full circle, what does AVA's work mean for you and the staff at AURI?
It's really about efficiency and effectiveness. For us at AURI, what we really look at is that it's important for us in our mission to figure out how to support the growing number of ag producers interested in starting a value added ag business. We've seen the demand on our services grow substantially, and there's only so many of us to help with limited time. So, with this investment, AURI wanted to provide more access to our knowledge library, the knowledge of our subject matter experts, the knowledge of our scientists, the knowledge of our business developers, and the network connections, and particularly as it relates to the more common questions. So, from an efficiency point of view, AVA can hopefully help our conversations with ag producers and founders focus more on the things that AVA can't answer, which again improves our effectiveness in helping these founders and these ag producers with their time. Because we're spending the time in a fashion that is more value added to each individual client on topics that aren't easily discoverable in a database. And again, just to reiterate, the effectiveness of AVA as a tool should only improve over time and with that user feedback.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our time together, Jason, but I did want to tell you that I went on the link and I'm very clumsy with technology and a little bit afraid, I guess, of artificial intelligence, but it was really quite impressive. Ava let me self-identify my role in the food ecosystem, then directed me to some frequently asked questions. Then I came up with a question of my own, and Ava gave me some good options. And then, even as I exited the chat, it gave me some follow up options on what to do next. So I just found it to be very easy to use and helpful and intelligent to the point that it was actually helpful. And I think you mentioned it earlier, common language, friendly, easy to use. I just thought it was a great tool.
Thanks, Dan. We put a lot of time and effort into scoping the appropriateness of the tool to be as helpful as possible without being scary, I think is a good way to put it. So, with that in mind, we built AVA to be somewhat minimalist in the fashion sense to keep it approachable. And so that user friendly interface was so important to lowering the barrier to entry. But at the same time, it was important to make sure that users could ask questions using their own words and not, again, not to be a professional food scientist to get the answers you're looking for. Last thing I would say, and this is something I would certainly encourage people when you are able to try out AVA for the first time, is that AVA provides references right in the answer that it develops for you. So, in other words, we would certainly encourage any user to dig into those references a little bit more to get more context and more information and really to validate and verify what AVA says. Because artificial intelligence is great, but it's not 100%. It's really good and it gets you started on the right track. But you sometimes want to validate what you're reading, and AVA provides those references upon which it draws its answers directly with every answer.
Have you tried to stump Ava and were you able to?
I did. The specific question that I asked was related to some of the regulatory environment around cottage foods in Minnesota, which I mentioned earlier. So when you do stump Ava, it'll let you know via a message or kind of what I would call a nonsense answer. And so in that case, it's even more important to provide feedback on Ava's performance, because what that does is it allows us to add new content to the knowledge library to make sure that you're seeing an answer to that question in the future. And so, with going back to that example of cottage foods and what it takes to become a cottage food producer in Minnesota, the answer Ava gave back the first time actually wasn't that bad. So, I wouldn't say Ava was particularly stumped per se. However, it also wasn't fully accurate. So, knowing that, I was able to add more content to the knowledge library so the answers would be better in the future.
What do you want to leave people with, Jason? What do you want them to know about Ava?
I think it's important to note that AVA is a tool. It is not the end all be all. And you should, as with any AI tool, you should look to validate the responses to the best of your ability. And AVA providing references is a great way to do so. However, what we are not trying to do is to have AVA be the only connection to AURI's content library and AURI's knowledge. So there are plenty of options within AVA itself and outside of AVA to contact AURI and to make sure that you can get what you need so that we can deliver the best on our mission to support value added agriculture in Minnesota and the Midwest, but also to make sure that you, as a food founder or an agricultural producer looking to expand your revenue streams, that you get what you're looking for to be as successful as possible. And you can always reach out to us at auri.org.
And if we want to just try AVA out or learn more about AVA, what's that address?
It is auri.org/AVA.
The virtual assistant.
That is correct.
All right, Jason, thanks for your time and great information, and best of luck to AURI and to AVA as she helps entrepreneurs and producers around the country.
Thanks, Dan.
We've been visiting today with Jason Robinson, the Business Development Director of Food at AURI. I want to thank him, and I want to thank you for joining us today and listening to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. Thanks to my podcast crew, Lisa Martinez, AURI Communications Manager and the editor of this production. To learn more about AURI, go to auri.org.